So today I thought I'd give you an update on our objectives for the allotment this year, and we are changing quite a bit. I think the biggest change that we've decided to make is we're no longer going to be self-sufficient in veg. And the reason for that is that there are just certain veggies that just really don't make sense for us to try and grow all year round. And we've got so much competition for the space that we've got that we've decided to kind of prioritise certain things. So the first thing we're not going to try and be self-sufficient in is winter squash. Now, we are still going to grow winter squash. We're going to grow about a third of the amount that we've grown in the past, and we're just going to buy it in October from the supermarket. It's so cheap. And just to give you an illustration, I think at the moment we're harvesting something around £34-35 per square metre in value off our allotment. And winter squash takes, like, one plant takes about 2 square metres and gives us about £4 worth of squash. And it's there for a long time. And so it's just not cost effective by comparison with the other competing crops that we could grow in that same space. The other thing that we're not going to grow all year round are cauliflowers. Now, we are still going to grow them for a spring harvest because I think they're just particularly lovely to have in spring during the hungry gap. But for the rest of the year, we're going to buy them if we need them. We don't have that many cauliflowers, but again, they just take up so much space. And unlike winter squash, which are quite reliable, the thing is with cauliflowers is they're not the easiest crop to grow. So you could end up taking up like half, a whole kind of square metre almost with cauliflower, with 2 or 3 cauliflowers, and only get one really good one in summer and autumn and winter. I think the spring they're a bit more predictable, but for the rest of the year we find it's hit and miss whether we got a really good crop off them anyway. The next thing that we're doing, and this is a pretty consistent theme for me, is that I'm reducing the amount of work that I do on the allotment. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm reducing the amount of time that I spend on the allotment, but it does mean that that time is optional. I spend a lot of time pottering around and chatting to people and helping people, but I don't count that as kind of allotment work. That is all kind of pure pleasure. But the amount of work time that I spend, weeding, clearing, watering, those sorts of things, I'm reducing that. And one of the biggest ways that I'm doing that is I'm not going to have any containers in the polytunnel in midsummer and late summer. So I am going to have still in spring because there's not that much watering required for containers in spring, but in midsummer, July and August, the watering requirement is just too much. And it's not just the amount of effort that's involved, it's the amount of water that I need to put down. And water is in a scarce supply at that time of year, so I'm just going to stop growing it in containers in the polytunnel during that time. I didn't grow a huge amount, but I did do cucumbers and tomatoes. All of those are going to be in the ground in the polytunnel. And I did about 80% of them in the ground in the first place, but now I'm just going to do 100% in the ground. So I will still do early tomatoes in containers. I will still do some early cucumbers perhaps in containers, but the vast majority, if not 100% of stuff, will be in the ground or in hanging baskets in the polytunnel in summer. Now, I know I could use drip to reduce the amount of watering that I need to do, but to be honest, the investment is just not worth it for me given the number of containers that I have, which is not that many, and the contribution to the yield is generally really small. So we are going to do some more things though. So we're kind of making space by not growing as much winter squash and as many cauliflowers, and using that space we're going to grow more carrots, especially in summer, in the ground. We've tried them in containers, we will still do a few in containers, but the vast majority of summer carrots we're going to grow in the ground. I think they'll be sweeter, I think they'll just be generally better quality. I just don't think there's any better place to grow carrots than in the ground in the sort of quantity that we're growing them, like 1,000 carrots or so. We're going to grow more red onions. We're hardly going to grow any white onions. All the white onions, in fact, that we're growing are overwintered ones, and they're tough ball. They last until about now. We're just kind of finishing them off. and sort of mid-February sort of time. But the red onions keep so much better. They're healthier. They look nicer. They are slightly trickier to grow. They don't grow quite as big, but I'm really happy with the red onions that we've been growing over the last few years. So we're basically just concentrating on red onions. We're going to grow more of them. We're also going to grow more salad onions. Now, onions are not really that high value a crop by comparison with salad onions. I love salad onions. I eat them all the time, and everybody does basically. So all the family love salad onions. So we're just going to grow a lot more salad onions, probably an extra third salad onions. The other thing we're going to grow more of is green garlic. So we love garlic bulbs and we eat those all the time, but we also love green garlic. And green garlic is basically just the stem of the garlic and the monobulb rather than the cloves, and you eat it when it's green, fresh from the ground rather than letting it dry. And so we normally eat it from about April through to perhaps the end of May, something like that, and then we start harvesting our main crop garlic in June. But this year we're going to try to continue the harvest so that we're harvesting it in June and July from a sowing in sort of February, March time. So I'm really looking forward to that because it's one of our favourite crops, and it kind of fills the gap when we haven't got leeks, although we are going to grow more leeks. So in the past we've never had a dedicated leek bed. We've always interplanted the leeks into brassica beds and all sorts of different places. This year we are going to have a dedicated leek bed, which is really exciting for me because again we really love our alliums. So we're also not going to grow as many cabbages, but we are going to grow more red cabbages. So we're not going to grow as many green cabbages anyway. We are going to try and get probably twice as many red cabbages and get them over a longer harvest period because again we really love red cabbages. They look beautiful and they're a lot healthier. For our other brassica greens, we're generally going to go for loose leaf, and that means we're going to be going collards, Brussels sprouts for leaves, colettes for leaves, kales and all of those sorts of things, as well as loose leaf cabbages. And there's two reasons for that. One is that we just like a small harvest of a lot of things, and generally speaking we find that harvesting a whole cabbage is kind of too much for us. We don't get through it, we end up wasting it. And the other thing is just the cleanup, because what we find is that we get a lot of slugs in the hearts of those cabbages, and it just takes us forever sort of chopping them up and trying to get all the slugs out and everything before we use them. So loose leaf is just more convenient for us. In general, we are trying to continue the trend of trying to have the richest diet for every month of the year. My objective is to try and have at least 30 different things available for harvest every month of the year, and to try and keep the harvest volume fairly consistent through the year, although obviously in sort of summer and autumn we will be harvesting a lot of stuff for storage, which I don't really count in that kind of smooth harvest. So the smooth harvest volume is generally the stuff we're harvesting to eat fresh that week, and since we feed the same number of people each week and we eat the same amount of fruit and veg each week, we're trying to harvest the same amount each week. Kind of fairly obvious really, to eat fresh, and then we obviously taking stuff from store all through winter and spring, and we're putting it in store in summer and autumn. And try and do a slightly better job of the peppers. I think one of the things we found with the peppers last year is that we got loads of them in July and August, and then we got loads of them in October, but we didn't kind of get a very smooth supply for eating fresh. So a supply that goes like this is fine for freezing and making passatas and ketchups and all of that sort of thing, but we eat a lot of peppers fresh. So what we're trying to do again is kind of smooth that out. So I've tried to get my successions a little bit better. So we'll have some really early ones for harvesting in July, and then the next batch should come in August, and the next batch should come in September, and then the ones that we're harvesting in July should be ready with their second crop in October. So hopefully lots of ripe peppers all the way through the year, rather than lots of ripe peppers at the beginning and the end, and lots of green ones in the middle. The other thing is, and this is very important, is Debbie's not going to be slaving over a hot stove in summer making as many preserves as she did before. We hardly eat any preserves, particularly jams, and so we end up just making them for family and to give away and all of that sort of thing. And we're making them because we've got so much surplus black currants and raspberries and things like that. And so this year we've taken a lot of those surplus bushes out, and we're making more space for other crops. And just generally speaking, you know, we want to focus on eating healthy food fresh rather than unhealthy food preserved. So the other thing is we're just tweaking the way that we do our tomatoes. So in the polytunnel last year we got blight, so this year we're going to grow a mix of blight resistant and ordinary tomatoes in the tunnel. And we're also going to grow more tomatoes for eating fresh at home in containers, so that we can pick them whenever we want to and snack on them. And I just generally find that tomatoes grown outside are just a little bit sweeter and, as I understand it, a little bit healthier, because they're getting all the spectrum, all the light frequencies, whereas the polytunnel is kind of filtering out some of those frequencies. And so the tomatoes are just not absorbing quite as much of the energy of the sun. They're just not quite as healthy. So lots of little container grown tomatoes in our future this year. Finally, we're eating less potatoes now, and so we're going to be growing less potatoes, and that means it just gives us a lot of spare containers at home that we can use for more tomatoes and peppers. And finally, I think, is that we're growing more fruit. So we've already got a lot of fruit. I think we've got about 20 apple, pear and plum trees. We put a few more apple trees in. I think we put 5 more apple trees in. This winter, every year we put more fruit trees in. Every year we put more fruit bushes in. We've got a lot of blueberries, we've got a lot of raspberries, a lot of blackberries, a lot of gooseberries. And yeah, just generally, you know, continuing to move slowly but gradually in the direction of ever more perennials. I hope you like this quick video. My name is Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.